Welcome to WorldXplain. Now, I want you to imagine, just for a moment, that you are descending into the absolute pitch-black depths of the ocean. You're inside a state-of-the-art Virginia-class nuclear submarine. As the sunlight fades away completely, you might be thinking you're about to see a giant squid drift past the viewport in the dark. But what you would actually experience is a sudden, catastrophic structural failure. In a fraction of a second, the heavily reinforced steel walls of that highly advanced military submarine would just completely cave in, crushing you instantly. Even the absolute pinnacle of human military engineering literally stands zero chance down here. So what does this all mean? What actually exists in a place so unbelievably deep and so intensely hostile that our absolute best technology is just vaporized by its mere existence? To really wrap our heads around what we're dealing with, we have to grasp the truly terrifying scale of the Mariana Trench. We're talking about a true bottom that plunges an astonishing 10,984 meters below the surface. Just let that number sink in for a second. To put that into perspective, if you were to somehow step into a high-speed elevator and ride it straight down to the absolute bottom, you would be descending the equivalent of 3,580 floors. Or imagine taking almost 100 full-length football fields, stacking them end to end, and pointing them straight down into a freezing, lightless void. Our human brains honestly just struggle to comprehend this level of depth.
Part 1. The crushing abyss, beyond the abyssal plain. Okay, let's really dive into this. To truly appreciate what manages to survive down here, we kind of need to redefine what the bottom of the ocean actually is. For 99% of the planet, the absolute bottom is something called the abyssal plain. It sits around 4,000 to 6,000 meters deep. It's this endlessly flat wasteland of mud and darkness, and it's pretty much the final biological limit for almost every deep-sea creature we know about. Everyone always assumes famous monsters like the giant squid live at the absolute bottom of the ocean. Well, actually, scratch that, they don't. They max out around 3,000 meters deep. If a giant squid ever tried to swim down to the regular abyssal plain, let alone the Mariana Trench, the pressure would violently crush and kill it instantly. The trench is not a normal ocean floor. It is a massive, violent tectonic scar where the Pacific plate is physically being dragged underneath the Mariana plate, ripping open a massive chasm miles deeper than the ocean ever should be.
This level of pressure is a literal death sentence for normal biology. Down here, the force is roughly 1,100 times greater than what we feel on land. But you know, numbers don't really do it justice. Imagine balancing the massive, crushing weight of a fully grown African elephant directly on your thumb. Now, imagine putting that exact same weight onto every single square inch of your body, all at the exact same time. That is 16,000 pounds of force per square inch. Under this kind of insane force, a normal fish's swim bladder, the gas-filled balloon it uses to float, implodes in a microsecond. Even the most rigid, incredibly strong bones face a similar fate. Because bones have these microscopic pockets of empty space inside them, that 16,000 pounds of pressure turns those tiny spaces into fatal structural weak points, collapsing them immediately. Down here, having empty space inside your body is a guaranteed death sentence.
Part 2. Rulers of the Void, Biological Defiance.
You absolutely cannot fight the trench. If you bring thick bones or heavy armor, the ocean is going to snap them. Which brings us to the mysterious, bizarre heroes that actually defy the odds and survive here. Now, if you were expecting the apex predator of the deepest place on Earth to be some terrifying armored leviathan, prepare to be surprised. Meet the Mariana snailfish. Living at an unfathomable 8,000 meters deep, this is the deepest living fish ever recorded by humanity. It is small, completely pale, and kind of pink. It has barely any internal bone structure, zero scales, and its skull is literally left partially open so its own brain doesn't get crushed inside its head by the pressure. Its flesh is completely translucent and gelatinous. It survives by doing something completely unhinged. It essentially became living water. Because water itself cannot be compressed, a body made mostly of watery jelly is functionally immune to hydrostatic pressure. The snailfish simply bends instead of breaking, completely outliving every single terrifying armored monster in the thousands of meters above it.
Part 3. The toxic snow diet, scraps of existence.
But here's the thing. Even a fish practically made of water needs energy to survive, right? In a world with absolute zero sunlight and absolutely no plants, what on earth fuels the bottom of the world? Well, the answer is arguably the most depressing food source imaginable: marine snow. Picture a continuous, slow-motion shower of decaying sludge. It is entirely composed of organic debris falling from the much shallower upper layers of the ocean. We are talking about dead plankton, rotting fish carcasses, microscopic pieces of shedding skin, and literal animal feces. This toxic, decaying sludge slowly drifts down for weeks through miles and miles of freezing ocean water until it finally settles on the absolute bottom. And believe it or not, this is the primary energy source for the entire ecosystem.
And feeding directly on that depressing snow are the hadal amphipods. These creatures look like severely deformed 5-centimeter-long shrimp. When a rotting carcass finally hits the seafloor, these amphipods swarm it by the thousands, acting like a plague of deep-sea locusts to strip it down to absolutely nothing. But there is a deeply tragic reality to their existence, known in biology as trench isolation. These creatures are trapped in the darkness forever. Their bodies are so hyper-adapted to impossible pressure that they can literally never leave. If an amphipod or a snailfish grew tired of the dark and tried to swim up into the normal deep ocean, the sheer lack of pressure would cause them to fatally decompress. They would turn into an actual useless blob long before they ever saw a single ray of sunlight.
But recently, scientists sent robotic landers down to collect these isolated amphipods, and they discovered something truly heartbreaking. They opened the stomachs of these creatures, and inside, they didn't just find marine snow. They found microplastics. Even at 11,000 meters deep, in a place completely untouched by the sun, our garbage had already beaten us there. They found plastic fibers from synthetic clothing and broken down industrial waste. Because the trench acts as a giant funnel, our pollution just drifts down for weeks and is blindly consumed by these desperate little scavengers. It's a highly emotional, brutal reality check. The ocean is massive, but absolutely everything on Earth is deeply connected.
Part 4. The 1960 Human Descent, the Trieste mission. And this brilliantly illustrates just how fragile human intrusion into the deep really is. You see, our trash wasn't the only thing to intrude upon this impossible abyss. Humans have physically descended into it. The year was 1960, long before modern microchips and before we had even put a man on the moon. Explorers Jacques Piccard and Don Walsh descended in a crude, incredibly heavy metal ball called the Trieste, which was suspended below a gasoline-filled blimp. They locked themselves in a sphere barely large enough to sit shoulder to shoulder and sank for 5 agonizing hours into pitch-black, freezing water. As they dropped, the temperature plummeted, and the intense weight of the ocean actively tried to crush them. Every single creak of metal must have sounded like the literal end of the world. And then, at 10,900 meters deep, just short of the absolute bottom, a loud, violent crack echoed through the tiny cabin. One of the outer plexiglass windows had fractured under tens of thousands of pounds of pressure. It was the sound of the ocean actively trying to break in. Miraculously, it held. They touched down on untouched silt for a deeply tense 20 minutes before dumping their ballast for a slow, terrifying ascent back to the world of the living. Now fast forward to today, when we finally sent high-definition remote-operated robots back to that exact same untouched seafloor, they discovered something completely mind-bending. Instead of a flat mud wasteland, they found structures that looked like strange coral. But they weren't coral. They were xenophorus. These are single-celled organisms. Normally, you need a microscope to see a single cell, right? But down here, the rules of biology are entirely broken. These are mindless protoplasmic cells the size of actual grapefruits. They act as deep-sea architects, literally gluing mud and sediment together to build complex, branching structures that serve as the trench's only form of shelter for other creatures. Even more bizarre, they are highly toxic. These giant, mindless cells actively absorb and concentrate insane levels of lead, uranium, and mercury inside their own bodies. They are massive blobs of toxic jelly, building the only real estate in a dead world. Part 5. The Trench Sounds, an Acoustic Echo Chamber.
You would naturally assume that being 11,000 meters underwater, surrounded by toxic cells and complete pitch blackness, it would be the most silent, peaceful place on the entire planet. Well, in 2015, scientists decided to test this assumption. They dropped a highly specialized, titanium-encased hydrophone straight into the abyss. When they retrieved the audio, they realized the trench was not silent at all. It was horrifying. Because sound travels much faster and further in incredibly dense water, the trench acts as a gigantic, funneling acoustic echo chamber. The recordings captured the eerie, violent screeching of the massive tectonic plates physically grinding against each other. It picked up the haunting, deep moans of baleen whales echoing down from thousands of meters above. And most terrifyingly of all, they could literally hear the weather. 7 miles underwater, completely disconnected from the sky, the hydrophone recorded the roaring vibrations of Category 4 typhoons raging violently on the ocean's surface.
Part 6. The Alien Ocean Simulator, Beyond Earth. Now we move to the final, most extreme depths of the trench cliffs.
We have giant toxic cells, jellyfish surviving impossible pressures, and the roaring sounds of surface storms echoing in the dark. But tucked away in the deepest, most hostile limits of the trench's underwater cliffs, we find the final, most mind-bending form of life. Geothermal mud volcanoes spewing boiling, highly toxic chemical fluids directly from the Earth's crust into the freezing water. And things actually live here. Vast mats of microbes cover these vents, breaking the most fundamental rule of biology on Earth. Since plants and sunlight don't exist here, these microbes bypass the sun entirely. They use a process called chemosynthesis. They literally eat the toxic methane and hydrogen sulfide boiling out of the rocks, metabolizing the raw toxic chemicals of the planet into usable energy.
This one discovery completely shifted how we view the universe. This is exactly why NASA studies the Mariana Trench. It is the closest thing we have to a working, functioning extraterrestrial ocean simulator. Look at Jupiter's moon Europa, or Saturn's moon Enceladus. They feature massive liquid oceans trapped beneath miles of solid ice, astronomical pressures, and absolutely zero sunlight. NASA realizes that if they want to understand how alien life might survive the impossible conditions of our solar system, they just need to study the chemosynthetic microbes living right here in our own dark, crushing clone of an alien ocean.
We explore this void looking for giant sea monsters, mostly because our human brains want an enemy we can fight. But the Mariana Trench isn't a hiding place for ancient megalodons, it's a crucible. It is a place that tests the very physical limits of life itself. And what we found is that life doesn't just survive here, it adapts, it shifts its biology, and it thrives off the chemicals of the Earth itself. So what if the greatest mystery of the deepest place on Earth isn't what's hiding down there, but what it's preparing us to find out there among the stars? Thank you for watching WorldXplain. See you in the next video.